Alrighty, the fan's on. Let's turn the fan off. There we go. I got to bake because of the heat wave. Woohoo, heat wave! I am a baked aggro squirrel. Yay. A quick thank you to the T5 peeps. Bob the Dragon, Data Magnet, Cat Crab Lobster, Dark Machine, Estrella the Dreamer, Mesic, Fudic Yol, and Casper Arnholtz. Thank you very much. Anyways, on to the story. Part 4, Message in a Bubble. Because lemnians evolved from a warm-blooded water species, they are excellent swimmers. Both their fingers and toes are webbed, which allows for excellent propulsion through water. They also are capable of communicating with each other underwater in a complex system of sound bursts against the skin. This sonar can travel great distances, and the message will arrive with little distortion. Dubious Review of Ontological Species Studies, all about lemniads, Message in a Bottle. Published by Glass and Steel, all about lemniads, Translation Engine 3.1415. After dinner, the team headed back to their quarters to review the mission folders and check on Fubsy. Fubsy helped with the mission review by laying on the mission folders, putting folders out of people's hands, or just getting in between people and their folders. "Fubsy, I adore you, but you're a pain," Zoe said, after Fubsy pulled her folder out of her hands for the second time. Nerif looked at Fubsy with furrowed brows. "What are you thinking?" Tarif asked. "About Fubsy, and how we are." Nerif stared, and Zoe jumped. "Let's not talk about that in here," Zoe said. "We don't know who may be listening." Nerif rolled her eyes. If the captain was listening to every room, the odds of him listening to us at this moment would be pretty low. "Except," Nate said, "we're the new shiny thing. I figure he's listening to us all the time." "We need to talk about this," Tarif said. "I can't believe we haven't talked about it before. I don't know what we were thinking." She looked at Bubsy again. "We all pass notes," Alan said. "Like in school. I even got a pencil and paper." He rummaged around in his gear and pulled them out. "See?" The team moved back to the table, and Alan handed the tools to Nerif. "You write down what you want to talk about. Keep it hidden, in case he's got cameras in here too. Pass the note around. We'll make comments on the paper and pass it around again." Nerif bit her lip and nodded. She wrote out, "We are addicted to Fubsy. We've brought Fubsy into a closed system. How do we stop everyone else from getting addicted to Fubsy? And what do we do if they do get addicted?" She handed the paper to Alan. He read it, nodded, and wrote down. "Good question. You're right. How do we not think of this?" Alan handed the note to Quirrell, who added, "Maybe Fubsy's addiction keeps us from looking at it too closely." Zoe took the note and scribbled her thoughts on it. "We never saw signs of anyone getting addicted to Fubsy before we left the transit hotel. Even the people who saw every day, like the desk clerk. I think something else is at play, other than just proximity to Fubsy." Tarif then added his own thoughts. "We should all think back to when we started caring for Fubsy. See what we can remember. Maybe we can find a common element." Alan wrote, "I loved her from the moment I saw her. I heard her little cry and picked her up and my heart just melted." Nate wrote, "You're a softie. I don't think your experience counts. However, I loved her from the beginning too. She was so fragile and soft and sweet, even when she bit me. That was cute." Nerif wrote, "Only Alan could fall in love with something that tried to get him. All I remember from the start is that she tried to eat his head." "No," Zoe corrected. "She grabbed onto him and didn't want to let go." "But you're right. As humans, we're probably not the best indicator of when the addiction kicked in." Nerif thought back. "I fell in love with her that night in the big storm. She crawled into my lap and wouldn't leave. Every time I tried, she just sunk her claws in deeper. At first, I was scared, because apex predator sticking me with claws. But then I just seemed sweet." She went back and underlined that blast bit. Tarif puzzled over this, and then wrote, "I don't remember Fubsy clawing me." Querif wrote, "She bit you a lot when she was wanting her food." Me too. In fact, she bit or clawed all of us. The fact that we're okay with that seems, weird. Well, not for you humans, but for us, mostly sane folk." After this message was shared, everyone looked at Fubsy. She was chewing on something, and then she saw them looking at her. She froze. She dropped the thing and covered it up with her paw, while still watching them. "Okay, then," Zoe said as she stood up. She took the note and crumpled it up. "Does anyone have any objections to me destroying this?" "The captain wants us to bring Fubsy to his quarters in the morning," Nerif reminded them. "Prudence would dictate that we leave her here, but the smart response would be for us to keep the captain happy," Nate said with a wink. "And bring her along. We'll just make sure that keep her in her harness." At 8 bells in the morning, they were outside the captain's quarter. Fubsy was pleased to be out and about and had sniffed the passing crew members, but hadn't been offended that no one wanted to pet her. Alan was offended on her behalf. "They don't know what they're missing, girl," she told Fubsy with a great sincerity. Then he gave her an extra pet to make up for the one she didn't get from the crew members. Captain Raccoon opened the door to his quarters. "Welcome, welcome! Perfect timing! Breakfast is just being served. I know what an important meal this is for you, and you, dear Fubsy. We have breakfast for you as well." Fubsy seemed suddenly shy with the full force of the captain's personality directed at her, and she hid behind Nerif's legs and then peered out at the captain. The captain wore a more sedate costume than the night before, but the fact that the black boots and lace-up shirts were not normally seen on FTL ships did not dissuade him from his clothing choices in the least. His quarters were totally in keeping with everything that they learned about Captain Rackham in the past few hours. Lined wood, a fancy window that looked onto a viewing screen that showed what the sky would look like if they weren't traveling by FTL. Brass hanging lights and red velvet pillows scattered on chairs around the wooden table. Finally, the computer access point was disguised to look like an old wooden campaign desk. Nate might have made a little squeak when he saw that room. The final and crowning glory, however, were the various flags hung on the walls. The droids finished laying out the food, and one droid said, "8 bells and all's wells, Captain." Then the droids left, leaving the team alone with the captain. "Come, sit, eat," he urged them. Fubsy needed no urging and headed over to the dish on the floor that was evidently set aside for her. "She's much bigger than I remember kittens being," Captain Rackham observed. He sat down at the end of the table closest Fubsy and reached out a hand to her. When she flicked her tail at him, he jerked his hand back and smiled. "It's just like the perfect balance between desire and fear. I want to touch her and yet..." "And yet," Zoe agreed. She was already seated at the table, sitting on the captain's right, so she could keep Fubsy under control. The Riffs were sitting down and Nate and Alan were already grabbing food. "None of you look injured," Captain Rackham said. "No missing body parts, no visible scars. Has a dear lady ever injured you?" Nerif laughed. A few minutes after being rescued, she attacked Alan's head. He was bleeding from several spots. "Hey! She didn't mean anything by it. She just didn't understand how to use her claws," Alan protested, around a mouthful of bread. "Zoe is missing an arm," Tarif said helpfully, "but Fubsy didn't have anything to do with that." As they ate, the topic turned from Fubsy to the treasure map. "I promised you a chance to ask questions and get answers," Captain Rackham said. "We don't have a lot of questions this morning, Captain," Zoe said, "but we do have one problem. We've read over the map and do not understand it one bit. It makes no sense. Do you even know what the island they're supposed to start on?" Captain Rackham shook his head and tapped his bracelet. The lights in his cabin dimmed and projection of the planets spun slowly over the table like a chandelier. "I was hoping you humans would be able to figure that out, what it meant. If not, there are only several islands to explore. We can pick one at random and see if we can discover any clues. I would recommend we start with the island where Steve was found." The captain gestured at the globe shifting position and enlarged one of the small islands. "Holy crap," said Nate. "Seriously?" "What is it? What do you see?" asked the captain. "The clue is start on the Isle of View," Zoe said. "In our language, Isle of View sounds like I love you. And that island," she pointed at an outraged finger at the island in the middle of the map, "that island is shaped like a fricking heart." "No, it's not, Zoe," Quirf said. "At least not a human heart, or any heart that I've ever heard of." "Not a real heart," Zoe confirmed. "A symbol for the word heart in our language. The map is written in puns." Zoe put her head in her hands, and Fubsy came over and climbed into her lap. "This is a nightmare," Zoe said. Exactly as Nate said, "This is going to be awesome!" End of chapter. And that, my friends, concludes this video. I hope that you enjoyed, and if you do, please consider supporting the author, even by popping over and leaving a thumbs up or a nice comment, just to show your appreciation for the story. However, if you wish to support this channel, there are links down below which will help immensely. I will see you all in the next one, and until then, I hope that you have a fantastic day. Cheers.